Welcome to Fresh Ground Theology's The Weekend Cup. Order yourself a fresh cup of coffee, pull up a chair, and join us as we explore some of the most fascinating saints and figures from church history. Kateri Tekakwitha entered the world in 1656 in a Mohawk settlement along the river that now bears her people's name. She was born into the Mohawk Nation, the easternmost member of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Europeans often called that alliance the Iroquois League, but it was a sophisticated union of native nations with its own political institutions, diplomatic traditions, and shared principles of governance. Kateri's father was Mohawk, and her mother was an Algonquin woman who had been captured and then incorporated into Mohawk society. Such adoption was an established means of restoring families and communities depleted by warfare and disease. Kateri's mother had encountered Christianity before entering the Mohawk household, and the earliest accounts indicate that she had been baptized. Whether Kateri remembered any of her mother's prayers or Christian instruction cannot be known with certainty, but the faith Kateri later embraced may not have been entirely unfamiliar. Through her mother, Kateri belonged to the Turtle Clan. Mohawk society was matrilineal, so clan identity descended through the mother rather than the father. Women were not marginal figures within this structure. Clan mothers exercised genuine social and political influence. The longhouse was more than a dwelling, it represented an extended network of kinship, responsibility, and belonging. The name Tekakwitha was received several English translations, including one who moves things aside and one who walks feeling her way. The precise meaning remains debated. The second interpretation became especially associated with her because of the illness that transformed her childhood. Takwitha was approximately 4 years old when smallpox tore through her community. European contact had introduced diseases against which native populations possessed little immunity, so an outbreak could devastate an entire village, killing people faster than the families could absorb the losses. Kakwitha lived, but her parents and younger brother died. Smallpox damaged her eyesight and left visible scars across her face. For the rest of her short life, harsh sunlight troubled her, and she sometimes had to move cautiously because she could not see clearly. She survived the epidemic, but survival meant carrying its evidence wherever she went. Her uncle and aunts took her into their household. There, she learned the work expected of a Mohawk girl: preparing food, producing clothing, carrying wood and water, tending crops, and contributing to the life of the longhouse. Ellen Walworth portrays her as reserved and skillful with her hands and reluctant to draw attention to herself. That portrait owes something to later devotional conventions, but even the earliest sources consistently remember Kateri as quiet and determined. Outside the Longhouse, the world was changing rapidly. The Mohawk had maintained an important commercial and political relationship with the Dutch colony of New Netherland. Through Dutch traders, European tools, weapons, and goods entered Mohawk territory, while furs traveled in the opposite direction. That relationship changed when England seized New Netherlands in 1664. The Dutch settlement at Fort Orange became the English city of Albany, forcing the Mohawk to adjust their diplomacy to another colonial government. Meanwhile, France attempted to strengthen its position from the north. French settlements along the St. Lawrence depended upon alliances with native nations that were frequently at war with the Haudenosaunee. The Mohawk, therefore, stood at the intersection of competing indigenous alliances and European empires. Trade, warfare, missionary activity, and territorial ambition became increasingly difficult to separate. In 1666, Tekakwitha was about 10. French troops marched into Mohawk territory. Their campaign destroyed villages and food supplies. The Mohawk avoided a major confrontation, but families were driven from their homes. Tekakwitha's community relocated and built a new settlement north of the Mohawk River, generally identified in the records as Kafnawaga or Gandalgwe. This event is essential to understanding her later encounter with Christianity. The French did not enter her world only as peaceful bearers of the gospel. The French soldiers had recently burned Mohawk homes. When Jesuit missionaries subsequently entered Mohawk villages under a peace agreement, the cross arrived beneath the shadow cast by French weapons. The Jesuits nevertheless occupied an uncertain position. They shared the assumptions and prejudices of 17th century Europeans, and their missions benefited the influence of New France. Yet, some also defended native communities from exploitation. They learned indigenous languages and endured hunger, cold, and danger and isolation because they sincerely believed Christ had sent them. The resulting story contains authentic faith alongside colonial ambition. Neither should be erased for the sake of making the history easier to tell. Tekakwitha listened to the missionaries. Although she did not immediately request baptism, her relatives remained suspicious of Christianity. They had reason to fear that conversion might divide the household, discourage participation in ceremonies, and draw family members towards settlements within French territory. At the same time, her aunts began preparing her for marriage. Marriage strengthened the Longhouse and ensured the continuation of the clan. Caqueta's refusal, therefore, created more than a disagreement over personal preference. According to accounts preserved by her Jesuit biographers and later retold by Walworth, her family brought a prospective husband into the Longhouse without warning. Caqueta recognized their intention and escaped before the arrangement could be finalized. Her relatives responded with pressure and additional work, hoping she would reconsider. She did not. At this point, she had not yet made her vow of virginity. She simply knew she could not consent to the future chosen for her by others. In 1675, the Jesuit priest Jacques de Lamberville came to the village. During a visit to the Longhouse, he found Tekakwitha recovering from an injured foot. Their conversation gave her an opportunity to disclose the desire she'd been carrying privately. She wanted to become a Christian. Lamberville did not immediately baptize her. He instructed her and observed her conduct over the following months. Baptism would place her in conflict with members of her household, and he wanted to determine whether she understood the commitment she was making. She continued despite the risk. On Easter Sunday, April 18th, 1676, Caquetha was baptized. She received the name Catherine in honor of Catherine of Siena. Within the linguistic world around her, that name took the form by which history remembers her, Kateri. Nothing dramatic happened by the surrounding landscape that morning. The political contest between France and England continued. Her people still faced the consequences of diseases and colonial pressure. Her eyesight remained damaged and her skin remained scarred. Baptism did not deliver Kateri from suffering. It declared whom she intended to follow through it. Nor did becoming a Christian cause her to cease being Mohawk. Kateri did not exchange one ethnicity for another at the baptismal font. She was a Mohawk woman who had placed her faith in Jesus. The difficulty was that neither her household nor the colonial world around her possessed an easy category for that identity. Her new name would soon cost her meals, friendship, security, and eventually her home. Yet the young woman who had so often been described through her frailty was preparing to demonstrate an extraordinary strength. Next time, we'll continue to explore the life of Kateri as she navigates this life of her newfound Christianity and a journey of nearly 200 miles of wilderness towards an indigenous Christian community along the St. Lawrence and toward the final years of her life. Thank you for listening to Fresh Ground Theology's The Weekend Cup. Come back next time and listen as we continue to explore saints and figures from church history.